Hey, it was good, gang. But yeah, man, I wanted to make a video where I just talk about Men's Mental Health Month. I know when you guys see this, it's probably gonna be really late into June. I know it's really late into June, but to make things kind of short, I had to get a new laptop, dealing with some stuff with the new laptop, and saving up money for that. My old one broke, it got all fucked up, and blah blah blah, and this, that, and the third. But yeah, man. Hopefully, I can get this out before the end of June because hopefully, I don't know, this is what I wanted to do. You know what I mean? June is Men's Mental Health Month, so I wanted to make a video just talking about it because I just feel like it's something I want to talk about. But yeah, since this month is Men's Mental Health Month, I thought I would dedicate a video to talking about techniques and strategies to improve people's mental health. Obviously, this applies to people in general, not just men, but whatever. I also kind of want to go over the how and why men's rates of suicide and depression are so much higher than women's, and what everybody can do to help change that. But firstly, I want to talk about the strategies. So usually when I, recommend strategies to people, one thing I try and tell them is to get outside more often and to try and get more sunlight. And the big reason why I tell people that is because of the fact that sunlight has been scientifically proven to produce serotonin in your brain. And serotonin is the same chemical used in antidepressants to help you feel less depressed. And generally, it's just a good idea to get sunlight and to just be outside in the fresh air. I feel like, especially nowadays, you can compare it like relative to like how it was in like the 1970s and 1980s and such. I feel like nowadays there's so much technology that people just kind of stay inside a lot of the time. They, stay on their phone, they stay on their laptop, they stay on their console, their video games, whatever. They stay watching movies and looking at social media. They don't really go outside and experience life and such. And I feel like social media and like the internet can really warp your perspective on the world and really warp like how you think about the world and stuff. So I definitely recommend people go outside, get some sunlight. Like I said, sunlight can produce serotonin in your brain. It's a good mood booster. It can help you out. And honestly, I don't know if you guys can tell from my last videos, but I do kind of just spitball them. I don't really have a script, but I try and write scripts, but sometimes I'm like, I don't really care about the script. And I just start talking. I just start rambling. But that was pretty much one paragraph of this script. And let me just go through here. Yeah, that's basically it. The other recommendation I usually give people is to try and get a little more exercise. And the reason why I tell people to exercise more is because of the fact that I know that exercise can also produce more like feel good chemicals in your brain. Things like serotonin, endorphins, things of that nature. I feel like just getting lots of exercise can be very helpful, and it doesn't have to be intense. It can be something mild or something small, and it can really be anything. Exercise is a very broad range of like a subject in general. It's a very broad range, so it can really be anything you want. You know, Personally, I do a little bit of boxing, not like fighting actual people, but like punching bag, shadow boxing, etc., etc. I do want to spar one day, but that's a different topic. Um, yeah, I also do a little bit of running, a little bit of home exercises like push ups, sit ups, things to that nature. If you want to get a gym membership, get a gym membership, But just working out, exercising, it's good for your body and it's good for your mind. And when you have a healthy body, you're going to have a healthier mind. You know what I mean? So I always recommend that. And the other big thing I want to mention is how important it is to not only reach out to medical professionals, but also to reach out to your loved ones, especially if you're a man, because I feel like in society, men have a much more difficult time dealing with mental health problems because, like, it's almost stigmatized to kind of talk about your emotions and talk about your feelings and stuff like that. And I feel like that's a big reason why there's so much male depression, but also male loneliness, where like sometimes you can be surrounded by people that are your family and your friends, but you can still feel so alone and so isolated. And I think that's one aspect of why that feeling can arise so often in men, is because you may be surrounded by people, but you're not surrounded by people who you're emotionally connected to, because you're kind of stigmatized for having any type of like deep intimacy or like deep connection with people. So everything feels so like surface level and so fake all the time. And then when you do get that one connection, most often it is a woman. And when you do get that connection, you kind of become attached to them and you like cling to them, you know? And I think all of that is just generally unhealthy. And I think the big way to stop that from being a problem is to just destigmatize the idea of, people talking about their emotions and talking about their mental health problems and talking about the things they go through and how they feel. And, you know, that's just really all I really want to say is just to any man out there, you really shouldn't be ashamed to just talk about any problems you're going through. And the other thing I said, for some reason my thing won't let me scroll. That's awesome. Another thing I said was that I think in general, people just need to be more kind and more open and more accepting of men in general. I feel like women and men, they can kind of see like an average regular man as like almost like a threat that they need to take care of or like defend against or deal with. And I think that perception or that like kind of stigma of masculinity being like almost demonized and kind of attacked really leads to a lot of feelings of like, I don't know how to describe it, but feelings of like being like a monster to men, or like just not giving men the space they need or want to feel accepted by the community that they live and reside in. You know what I mean? It's a little bit crazy to be a person in a society anywhere and to go outside and hear people and look at social media and see people and hearing about the way they talk and the way they look at you as if you're a danger to them, as if you're like a threat or a plague or something undesirable that they don't want around, or that something like you yourself, your own personal characteristics are a kind of like a cancer or whatever that people don't want. And I do feel like sometimes the way masculinity is presented in social media mostly, and also a little bit in some media forums and just the way it's talked about in general, it really feels like there's kind of an attack on it to kind of demonize men, and that idea alone like isolates them. It isolates them emotionally, and that can definitely have a really bad impact on their mental health, and it can make them feel very like alone even when they're, like I said, surrounded by people they love. So I think that's one thing that as a society we need to do less of, less stigmatizing men and such. Let's see here. Yeah, I just think women and men need to be more kind to men, be more kind to everybody in general. And I feel like men specifically for Men's Mental Health Month, I feel like men go through unique struggles that are pretty much ignored by society. Ignored by society, ignored in the media, and it's like, ignored in the culture in America. Um, Namely, like loneliness. People, I kind of went over this. My bad. Yada yada yada. Like I said, I do have a script, but I don't follow it one to one, even though I probably should, but I don't. So I apologize for that. Bear with me. Uh, let's see. Yeah, basically what I said, the male suicide rate is so high because of how society just disregards and invalidates a lot of men's problems. I know a big thing that happens to men is whenever a man has a problem, especially on social media, but you can also see it in like regular media, regular like fiction and such, that whenever a man has a problem, the go-to response for most people is to tell that person that their problems don't matter because there are other people somewhere else whose problems are worse. And that's always a terrible thing to go to. People hate hearing that. Someone, I don't know, can't afford groceries, or the groceries they can afford aren't good and they only have bad food and, they're eating or whatever. And then you're like, man, these groceries suck. And then some random person comes out of nowhere and goes like, oh, well, you might not like your food or whatever, but there's someone in like Australia who's starving to death or something, or there's a child in Palestine, what's it called, Gaza. There's a child in Gaza who's starving right now, so you should be lucky for what you have. And that kind of mindset of like men aren't allowed to talk about or express the problems that they have because so and so, this, that, and the third, whatever group of people or whatever other person doesn't have or has worse problems, is just really alienating, and it really invalidates the problems that men go through, and it's just not good in general. And I know that generally speaking, I know this is kind of a bit of a short video. Just generally speaking, it's kind of short for like a YouTube standard. It's like 10 minutes, but I am kind of running out of things to say. But I want to leave this video on a positive note, and the positive note being that wherever you are or whoever you are, there is always help for you. And I encourage everybody to reach out to anyone you can, a medical professional, a loved one. If you have to go to the emergency room and, spend a couple days in the emergency room, or go to a mental hospital, or get a therapist, no matter however much it costs, I highly encourage it, because at the end of the day, we're all on this earth to experience, I would assume most people would want to experience joy and happiness and pleasure and, good emotions, good feelings, and have good experiences. And one big catalyst for having good experiences and just a good life in general is having good mental health, being happy, being around people who love you, having your emotions validated, having your problems validated, having people around you who you can talk to about your problems and, have really listen to you and understand you. And I think that's a big part of life in general. I think it's really important for people. And I highly recommend anybody who's struggling with anything to reach out and talk to people. But yeah, let's see. I also said a bit of like billions of people live on this earth, and everybody goes through hard times. And someone out there has gone through what you've gone through, and they've kept moving on forward from it. You know, life is very precious. Life is very precious, and not to get religious or anything, but we don't know what happens after it. We don't know what comes before it. And there's hundreds of religions out there. Maybe not hundreds. I'm exaggerating. Probably maybe 10. But you know what I'm trying to say. I'm exaggerating. But there's a lot. There's a lot. There's Christianity, whatever Muslims is, Jewish people. There's like Buddhism. There's like, I'm sure Japan has their own thing too. Like there's a ton. There's at least like 6 or 7. Right? There's a lot. And really, as much as those religions would like to say, we don't know what happens after life is over. And we don't know what happens before it. And because of that one little fact, I think that life, no matter who it is precious and valuable. And I think that you should value it and do what you can to make the most of what you have. Even if what you have isn't the greatest, And I don't think you owe it to anybody to be alive. I don't think you owe it to anyone on this earth, or even to yourself, to be alive. But I encourage you to keep fighting and to try and stay alive, and try and go through your problems and try and fix them, and try to make it to the end of whatever you need to make it to the end of. Because life is all about the journey and the experience of going through things. And yeah, I suppose that's about it. Let me just scroll through this a little bit more. Yeah, I'll try and link some resources down below in the description for anybody struggling with mental health. And to just remember not to give up hope. I love all my brothers and sisters that walk on this earth. Anyone, any human being on this earth, in one way or another, we're all siblings. You know what I mean? And, I have love for all my family, all my brothers, all my sisters, all my mothers and fathers, uncles, aunties. I love them all. So, yeah. I just hope wherever you are, you have a good life. Bye.